Canada is not a bilingual country. We have been led to believe that it is, but it is not a bilingual country.
What do you make of her refusal to speak English to reporters?
Yeah, her press aide swept his hand across the microphone to prevent her answering an English question. But I do note that the sovereigntists have always been handy to accept the $7.5 billion a year they get in equalization from English-speaking Canada.
All right, thanks.
This is an example of the kind of situation we find ourselves dealing with more and more in Canada these days. A province that refuses to recognize the flag and common language of the country of which they are a part of. To them, the English language is considered the tongue of the conquerors and colonizers, and they want nothing to do with it. This is clearly evident during this anti-English protest against performers singing in English at a festival on the Plains of Abraham.
But the small, noisy group was determined to show its anger against English tunes. It's not acceptable, he says, to have them come here and sing in the language of the colonizer.
As far as they are concerned, bilingualism basically means the majority of English should appease the minority, and everyone should learn French. It seems perhaps the sooner we accept this injustice and their truth, the more empowered we will be. We all should seriously take note that they are very quick to demand that the rest of Canada accept their language as the common language of their so-called nation/country. Canada, the actual country, should adopt this concept also.
There has to be a common language in a country, and so it's French or English. Well, I think that when you're 82% of the population, the majority wants it to be French.
Isn't it quite evident that this would be much more reasonably applied to the country of Canada and the English language? After all, Canada is the actual country, and the numbers are quite comparable. They also believe that French is the only language that warrants any legal rights, Bill 101, in that province, which, it deserves repeating, is still just a province that resides within the country of Canada. Despite the unfair ruling of the Supreme Court, and no matter which clause that province uses in an attempt to excuse it, that fascist law is complete and utter unconstitutional injustice to those unilingual English Canadians living in the province.
My name is Mauro Mujica. I am the chairman of the board and CEO of US English Inc., the nation's oldest and largest organization promoting English as the official language of the country. I was going to give my testimony in Spanish so Mr. Conyers could understand me, but I'll continue in English. Importance. Before I came to study architecture at Columbia University, I knew very well that I was going to live in an English-speaking country, and I had no doubt in my mind that I had the civic duty to learn the common language of the country. Mr. Chairman, language is a powerful factor in human society. Just as it has the power to unite, it also has the power to divide. The job of government is to foster and advance the common good. A country that has an official language policy is certainly preferable to a country divided by linguistic factions. Just look at Belgium, look at Canada. Ironically, only a common language can preserve that tradition. Only a common tongue can bind together a nation. English has already become the global language, and people all over the world are learning it.
How did Canada come to be this way? It stems back to when Mr. Trudeau began his foray into Canadian politics. Some people happen to have a keen sense of his ambitions and started noticing his interesting political appointments and political maneuvers. Mr. J.V. Andrew was one of those people who noticed that certain steps were being taken by Mr. Trudeau and the government of the day, which was positioning Canada on a path towards a particular conclusion. What path? What were the steps? And what is the conclusion? In his book, Bilingual Today, French Tomorrow, Mr. Andrew examined these steps that Trudeau was taking, while also looking at future steps that would be necessary in order to see to it that Canada could ultimately be turned into a French nation. Despite Trudeau's likely desire to fulfill his dream in one swift motion, similar to a few smaller-minded and short-sighted politicians of the day, i.e. René Lévesque, Mr. Trudeau envisioned the bigger prize and was shrewd enough to realize that the small-minded ideal of pushing for Quebec to separate would leave them isolated in a huge English-speaking North America. Besides, why just have one province when you could put the pieces in place so that one day your people could have control of all the provinces, indeed, all of Canada? Trudeau also realized that one could not just simply hand over an English-dominated country to the control of the French just like that. That kind of abrupt change would likely not go over too well. So, in order to win the prize and eventually arrive at the desired outcome without raising the ire of the English, the strategy would have to be a well-thought-out set of gradual steps over the course of many years. In hindsight, the ultimate goal being pointed out here positions a bright spotlight on the reasons why Trudeau was against Quebec separating and why he came to be viewed as such a staunch federalist. It also serves as a clear reminder of Trudeau's complete understanding of the English mindset, and also highlights the far-reaching strategic chess-like thinking Mr. Trudeau was all about. And let's face it, even though not many are happy with what Trudeau has done, we surely must give him credit while admiring his foresight and strategic planning. A note to our Liberal friends, it's such a pity that the Liberal Party has continued with this mantra which Trudeau began, of handing more and more power and control over to the French. It leaves remaining Canadians with very little choice of who to vote for. Getting back to the steps, Trudeau gathered a small clan to assist him. This clan consisted of, but was not limited to, Jean Marchand, Jean-Luc Pépin, and Gérard Pelletier. This like-minded small clan of group of fellows was then strategically placed in just the right positions of power within the government. I cannot swear it, but I think we were thinking to ourselves, we are a small group, Trudeau, Pelletier, Marchand, Lalonde, Chrétien, myself, and a few people in the civil service, say 50 all told. But we were bringing off a revolution. We held the key posts. We were making the civil service bilingual, French, kicking and screaming all the time. Jean-Luc Pépin, Minister of Industry, 1970. As a result of Trudeau's clever chess-like strategic foresight, Canadians didn't notice the tactical placement of these clansmen, nor did they notice the gradual steps taking place. The projection was the combination of this clan in strategic positions along with the small steps taking place over time could culminate in a condition one day that would allow the fluid and natural transition from one power state to the other. That is to say, exactly what we are seeing today, the beginning of the seamless, low-key, uneventful transition from a Canada under English control to a Canada under French control.
Mr. Speaker, enough is enough. 75% of our questions are put in French and answered in English. We know that the parliamentary secretary can speak French. He should either speak French or they should find someone else to do it.
Using the French term seems appropriate, a coup d'etat. It adds the element of irony as this is what we have, a near complete transition of power or a takeover, accomplished without having fired one single shot. Which brings to mind a couple of quotes from the book. A conversation between a patron, Mr. Abbott, and a server in a restaurant or hotel overlooking the Plains of Abraham. To Mr. Abbott, "You won the battle, Mr. Abbott, but you lost the war. Your mistake was to allow us to keep our language, our culture, and our religion. I can assure you, sir, that once we have the power back, we will not make that same mistake." And the other quote, Quebec and the French are playing chess while English Canadians are playing checkers. If anyone has any doubts about this transition of power, I challenge any majority unilingual English Canadian citizen to try, running to be Prime Minister of Canada, or, for that matter, the leader of the official opposition.
Oh, can't you see what that woman, Lord, she been doing to me?
It is pretty sad, and there is definitely something seriously wrong when a unilingual English Canadian who represents approximately 80% or more of the population of Canada outside the province of Quebec cannot aspire to run to be Prime Minister or leader of the official opposition within their own country because they cannot speak the minority language of the mere 8% of the population. Of course, even if you do not aspire to becoming Prime Minister or leader of the official opposition, the sheer difficulty that unilingual English Canadian citizens are now having with obtaining employment in Canada without knowledge of a language, which represents a mere 8%, if not a little less, of the total population is reprehensible. This injustice, along with English being outlawed in the province of Quebec, basically proves this country is pretty much in the later stages of being under French rule already. Keep in mind, folks, unless this path is altered, this insane limitations restricting majority English-speaking citizens from employment in all levels of their own government and many areas in the private sector also, will grow to be more and more of a harsh reality in Canada as there is an authentic trickle-down effect that takes place once bilingual services are provided in any given sector. If it does not affect you, it will affect your sons and daughters, or perhaps your grandchildren down the road. Bilingualism should not be essential for 100% of the workplace, when it is only somewhat necessary for a tiny 4 to 8% of the population.
You know, we're different. We want to stay different in North America. Why not?
As a country?
Yeah. Yes.
Not as part of
Very
Canada.
enthusiastic about this.
Not as part of Canada.
No.
You want out.
Yes.